Karen strode into the doctor's office, her bright red lipstick gleaming and her eyeshadow perfectly applied. She flashed a confident smile as she approached the receptionist's desk. "Hi. I have an appointment with Dr. Sanchez," she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, glanced up from her computer screen. "All right. Let me just check you in. Could you please remove your mask for a moment?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I most certainly will not remove my mask. Don't you know who I am?" Sarah blinked, taken aback by Karen's hostile tone. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it's our policy to have all patients remove their masks briefly for identification purposes. It's for everyone's safety." "Safety? Pah," Karen scoffed. "I'll have you know I'm a very important person. I demand to see the doctor immediately, and I won't be removing my mask for anyone." Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Sanchez emerged from his office, a warm smile on his face. "Ah, Ms. Karen, so good to see you. Please, come on back." Karen shot a triumphant look at Sarah and strode past the receptionist, her heels clicking on the tile floor. As she followed the doctor, she leaned in close and whispered, "You know, I'm a regular donor to this hospital. I expect a certain level of special treatment." Dr. Sanchez's brow furrowed, and he gestured for Karen to take a seat in his office. "I'm afraid I don't quite understand what you mean, Ms. Karen. Now, if you don't mind, could you please remove your mask so I can take a look at you?" Karen's eyes widened, and she recoiled as if the doctor had asked her to do something utterly unthinkable. "Remove my mask? Do you have any idea how much time and effort I put into my appearance today? This mask would ruin everything." The doctor's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, but it's a requirement for all patients to remove their masks during their appointment. It's for your own safety and the safety of my staff. If you're unwilling to comply, I'm afraid I can't proceed with your visit." Karen's face flushed with rage. "How dare you? Don't you know who I am? I demand to see your supervisor immediately." Dr. Sanchez sighed and pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Sarah, could you please come in here for a moment?" As Sarah entered the office, Karen turned to her, her eyes blazing. "You tell this doctor that he needs to show me the proper respect. I am a very important person, and I won't be treated this way." Sarah glanced uncertainly between Karen and the doctor. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Dr. Sanchez is right. It's our policy for all patients to remove their masks during their appointments. If you're not comfortable with that, I'm afraid we'll have to reschedule your visit." Karen's mouth opened and closed, her face contorting with fury. "This is an outrage. I'm leaving, and I'll make sure you all regret this." With that, she stormed out of the office, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Dr. Sanchez and Sarah exchanged a bewildered look, unsure of what to make of the woman's entitled behavior. As Karen angrily stormed out of the doctor's office, her mind raced with plans for revenge. How dare they treat her, a pillar of the community, with such disrespect? She was going to make sure they all paid for this insult. Reaching her car, Karen fumbled in her purse for her phone. Her fingers trembled with rage as she scrolled through her contacts, finally landing on the number for the hospital's CEO. "This is Karen Wilkins." She barked into the phone as soon as the call connected. "I need to speak with the CEO immediately. It's a matter of the utmost importance." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "I'm afraid the CEO is in a meeting at the moment, Ms. Wilkins. Can I take a message and have him call you back?" Karen scoffed. "You can tell him that I'm calling to file a formal complaint against one of his doctors. Dr. Sanchez refused to see me and treated me with the most appalling disrespect. I demand a meeting with the CEO, and I want it today." The receptionist on the other end of the line hesitated. I'll pass along your message, Ms. Wilkins. However, I can't guarantee the CEO will be available to meet with you today." "Well, you'd better make him available," Karen snapped. "I'm one of the hospital's top donors, and I won't hesitate to take my money elsewhere if this isn't resolved to my satisfaction." Without waiting for a response, Karen ended the call and tossed her phone onto the passenger seat. Her heart was racing, and she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. No one was going to get away with treating her this way. She was going to make sure of that. As she started her car and pulled out of the parking lot, Karen's mind was already whirring with her next move. She was going to make sure that Dr. Sanchez and the entire hospital staff learned a lesson they would never forget. True to her word, Karen wasted no time in setting her plan of revenge into motion. She spent the next several hours drafting a scathing letter detailing her traumatic experience at the doctor's office, complete with embellished details and exaggerated claims. As she typed, her fingers practically twitching with fury, Karen made sure to emphasize her status as a prominent donor and her displeasure at the disrespect she had endured. She demanded a formal apology, the immediate termination of Dr. Sanchez, and a substantial financial compensation for her emotional distress. Satisfied with her work, Karen printed out the letter and placed it in a crisp white envelope. She then drove to the hospital, striding through the front doors with an air of self-importance. "I need to see the CEO immediately," she declared, slamming the envelope down on the receptionist's desk. "This is a matter of the utmost urgency." The young woman behind the counter, her eyes widening at Karen's aggressive tone, quickly scanned the letter. I'll make sure the CEO receives this right away, ma'am. However, I can't guarantee they'll be able to meet with you today." Karen leaned in, her gaze narrowing. "Oh, he'll meet with me. You see, I'm one of this hospital's largest donors, and I won't hesitate to take my money elsewhere if my concerns aren't addressed immediately." The receptionist swallowed hard, recognizing the implied threat. I'll do my best to arrange a meeting, ma'am." Nodding with satisfaction, Karen turned on her heel and marched towards the nearest seating area, her heels clicking against the gleaming floor tiles. She settled into a plush armchair, her manicured fingers drumming impatiently on the armrest as she waited for the CEO to appear. It wasn't long before a well-dressed man, his brow furrowed with concern, approached her. "Ms. Wilkins, I understand you have a rather urgent matter to discuss. Please come with me to my office." Karen's lips curled into a triumphant smile as she rose from her seat and followed the CEO, her steps radiating a sense of vindication. She was about to teach these people a lesson they would never forget. As Karen strode into the CEO's office, her eyes scanned the spacious room with a critical gaze. She took a seat in the plush leather chair across from the desk, crossing her legs and fixing the CEO with a stern look. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," she began, her tone dripping with feigned politeness. "I'm sure you can imagine how distressed I was by the treatment I received from one of your doctors earlier today." The CEO, a middle-aged man named Robert, nodded sympathetically. "Yes, I understand you had a rather unpleasant experience. Please, tell me more about what happened." Karen launched into her carefully crafted narrative, embellishing details and exaggerating her emotional distress. She described how she had been humiliated and disrespected by Dr. Sanchez and how his callous disregard for her needs had caused her severe anxiety. "I'm a longtime supporter of this hospital, Robert," she said, leaning forward and placing her manicured hand on the desk. "And I'm simply appalled that I was treated in such a manner. I demand a full investigation, a public apology, and the immediate termination of Dr. Sanchez." Robert's brow furrowed as he listened to Karen's tirade. "I see. Well, I can certainly understand your frustration, Ms. Wilkins. However, I want to assure you that we take all patient concerns very seriously." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "From what I've been told, it seems there may have been a misunderstanding regarding our mask policy. As you know, we have certain protocols in place to ensure the safety of our staff and patients. I'm sure Dr. Sanchez was simply trying to follow those protocols." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she scoffed dismissively. "Safety? Don't give me that nonsense. I'm a respected member of this community, and I won't be treated like some common patient. I demand that you fire Dr. Sanchez immediately and compensate me for the trauma I've endured." Robert's expression hardened. "I'm afraid I can't simply fire Dr. Sanchez based on your accusations alone, Ms. Wilkins. We have a thorough review process for all personnel matters, and I will not circumvent that process, no matter how influential you may be." Karen's face flushed with rage, and she slammed her fist on the desk. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm the reason this hospital is able to function at all. If you don't do as I say, I'll take my money elsewhere, and you can kiss this place goodbye." Robert leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "I understand your position, Ms. Wilkins, but I'm afraid I can't compromise my principles or the well-being of our patients, no matter the circumstances. If you're truly unsatisfied, you're welcome to take your business elsewhere." Karen's mouth opened and closed as she struggled to find the words to respond. The CEO's refusal to cower to her demands had caught her off guard, and she felt her power slipping away. Realizing she was losing the upper hand, Karen abruptly stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't over, Robert. Mark my words, you'll all regret this." With that, she stormed out of the office, her wounded pride fueling her determination to exact her revenge. As Karen seethed with fury on her drive home, she couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation and defeat. How dare the CEO refuse to bow to her demands? Didn't he understand the power and influence she wielded? Gripping the steering wheel tightly, Karen's mind raced with ideas for how to exact her revenge. She couldn't let this slight go unanswered. She needed to make them pay for disrespecting her in such a public way. An idea began to form in her mind, and a malicious grin spread across her face. She would hit them where it hurt the most, their reputation and their bottom line. Pulling into her driveway, Karen hurried inside and booted up her laptop. She began composing a series of scathing reviews, targeting not just Dr. Sanchez, but the entire hospital staff. She painted a vivid picture of her traumatic experience, embellishing the details to make the situation seem far worse than it had been. "This hospital is a disgrace," she wrote in one review. "The staff are rude, incompetent, and have no respect for their patients. I will never set foot in this place again, and I urge everyone I know to avoid it at all costs." Karen continued to post similar reviews on every platform she could find, using a variety of aliases to make it seem as though the backlash was coming from multiple sources. She was determined to tarnish the hospital's reputation and hurt their bottom line. As the scathing reviews began to accumulate, Karen felt a sense of grim satisfaction. She knew that the hospital would be scrambling to mitigate the damage, and that thought brought her a perverse sense of joy. But Karen wasn't done yet. She next turned her attention to the hospital's social media pages, flooding them with angry comments and demanding that the CEO and Dr. Sanchez be held accountable for their egregious behavior. "This hospital is a disgrace," she wrote in one particularly vitriolic post. "I was treated with the utmost disrespect, and the staff here have no regard for their patients. Shame on you all." Karen's relentless campaign of retaliation continued for days as she poured her time and energy into ensuring that the hospital would pay for their perceived slight against her. She was determined to make them regret the day they had dared to cross her. As Karen's scathing reviews and social media tirades began to gain traction, the hospital found itself in the midst of a full-blown PR crisis. Patients and community members alike were voicing their outrage, and the hospital's reputation was quickly becoming tarnished. The CEO, Robert, and Dr. Sanchez were forced to hold an emergency meeting to address the situation. They knew they needed to act quickly to mitigate the damage before it spiraled out of control. "This is a nightmare," Robert said, his brow furrowed with concern. "These reviews are completely unfounded, and yet they're gaining traction like wildfire. We have to do something to counteract this before it completely destroys our reputation." Dr. Sanchez, who had been unaware of the brewing controversy, felt a sense of dread wash over him. I had no idea this was happening. I was just following hospital policy. I never intended to upset anyone. Robert sighed heavily. I know, James, and I believe you. But the fact is, we're facing a serious public relations battle here. We need to get out in front of this and set the record straight. The two men spent the next several hours brainstorming a strategy to address the situation. They decided to issue a formal statement addressing the concerns raised in the reviews, emphasizing the hospital's commitment to patient safety and its long-standing reputation for excellence. They also instructed the marketing team to ramp up their social media presence, flooding the channels with positive stories and testimonials from satisfied patients. The goal was to drown out the negative narrative and regain control of the narrative. As the hospital's PR team swung into action, the backlash against Karen's campaign began to subside. The positive content and the hospital's transparent response seemed to resonate with the community, and the tide of public opinion began to turn. Karen, meanwhile, watched in frustration as her efforts to bring down the hospital seemed to be losing momentum. She had been confident that her tactics would cripple the institution, but now she found herself increasingly isolated and outnumbered. Realizing that her campaign was no longer having the desired effect, Karen began to wonder if she had miscalculated. Perhaps she had underestimated the hospital's ability to weather the storm, and the depth of her own hubris. As she sat alone in her living room, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that the tables were starting to turn. She had wanted to teach them a lesson, but now it seemed that the lesson might be for her instead. As the hospital's public relations team worked tirelessly to counteract Karen's smear campaign, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Patients and community members rallied behind the hospital, expressing their support and appreciation for the staff's dedication and professionalism. The hospital's transparent response, coupled with the outpouring of positive testimonials, gradually eroded the credibility of Karen's accusations. Slowly but surely, the narrative began to turn against her. Karen, growing increasingly frustrated and isolated, doubled down on her efforts, flooding social media with even more scathing attacks. But her tactics were now being met with a barrage of rebuttal and criticism from the very people she had hoped to sway. "This woman is clearly unhinged," one commenter wrote. "The hospital staff have done nothing wrong, and her relentless campaign of harassment is nothing short of despicable." Another chimed in, "I've been a patient at this hospital for years, and I've always received excellent care. This Karen character is just throwing a tantrum because she didn't get her way." Sensing the shift in public sentiment, the hospital's legal team decided to take action. They issued a cease and desist letter to Karen, warning her that her continued defamation of the hospital and its staff could result in a lawsuit. Karen, incensed by the audacity of the hospital's response, refused to back down. She angrily fired off a string of increasingly vitriolic messages, threatening to take her case to the media and accusing the hospital of a cover-up. But her words fell on deaf ears. The more she ranted and raved, the more the public saw her as a delusional and entitled individual, unwilling to accept responsibility for her own actions. As the hospital's reputation began to recover, Karen found herself increasingly isolated and ostracized within her own social circles. People who had once cowed to her demands now saw her for the petty, vindictive person she truly was. The once powerful Karen, who had believed she could bend the world to her will, now found herself facing the consequences of her own hubris. The very people she had sought to punish had instead turned the tables on her, leaving her to confront the harsh reality of her own downfall. As the dust settled and the hospital's reputation was restored, Karen found herself facing a harsh reality. She had well and truly overplayed her hand. Her vindictive campaign had backfired spectacularly, leaving her isolated and humiliated. The once formidable socialite found herself the subject of scorn and ridicule, both online and within her own social circles. People who had once kowtowed to her demands now saw her for the entitled, petty individual she truly was. Karen's attempts to regain control of the narrative only served to further erode her credibility. Her constant stream of angry rants and accusations were met with a deafening chorus of derision and dismissal. "This woman needs to get a grip," one commenter wrote. "Her behavior is completely unhinged, and she's only making a fool of herself at this point." As the hospital's legal team threatened to pursue a defamation lawsuit, Karen finally realized the full extent of her folly. The power and influence she had once wielded had crumbled around her, and she was left with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat. In a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, Karen reached out to the hospital's CEO, Robert, hoping to negotiate a resolution. But her pleas for forgiveness and promises of future cooperation fell on deaf ears. "Ms. Wilkins, I'm afraid the damage you've done is beyond repair," Robert told her, his voice tinged with a mixture of pity and exasperation. "Your actions have not only tarnished our reputation, but they've also deeply hurt the very people you claim to care about. I'm sorry, but we can no longer accept your support or association with this hospital." With those words, Karen's world came crashing down. The realization that she had lost everything, her status, her influence, and even her sense of self, was a bitter pill to swallow. She had allowed her ego and entitlement to consume her, and now she was paying the ultimate price. As Karen retreated from the public eye, she was forced to confront the harsh truth that her own actions had brought about her downfall. The once powerful woman had become a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the mightiest can fall when they allow their sense of privilege and self-importance to run unchecked. In the end, Karen's story had become a testament to the dangers of unchecked entitlement and the consequences of using one's influence to bully and manipulate others. It was a hard-earned lesson that would echo through the halls of the hospital and beyond, a reminder that even the most powerful must ultimately answer for their actions.